Well, what happened to your officer?
It looks like there's been a murder, Detective.
Who's the victim?
His name is Macroeconomics. He is a professor at the University of Oxford. According to locals, he had an informative seminar about the changes in demand, such as the taste of buyers, income, prices of related goods, and consumer expectation.
Any witnesses?
No witnesses, but we have 5 suspects.
Lead the way. Now, ma'am, do you mind telling me what happened to you tonight?
Well, Professor Econ was holding his annual dinner party as usual. Miss Scarlett, Mrs. Peacock, Mr. Green, and Professor Plum were all invited. I believe they met at a economy convention for the rich and famous. I was working in the kitchen when I heard a scream, and I ran out to find Mrs. Scarlett and Mrs. Peacock standing over his body.
Were either of them holding a weapon of some sort or have any blood on their clothes?
Not that I could recall. I was so shocked. I doubt that I could remember.
Don't worry, ma'am. We'll catch the culprit. Don't you worry.
Can you tell me what you were doing standing over the deceased?
Obviously, I was looking at the body with Miss Scarlett.
But how did you get there, and why?
Well, Miss Scarlett and I had been in the lounge with Professor Economy, but he left to go see the progress on dinner, and he was taking quite a while, so we went to follow him, and when Miss Scarlett saw the body, she screamed.
Did you have any personal grudges against Mr. Econ?
Nothing worth mentioning.
Do you know anything that might help us with the investigation, like any other grudges?
Well, I may have overheard a conversation between Professor Economy and Mr. Green. Apparently, Mr. Green was being blackmailed. I don't know what over.
What can you tell me about Professor Plum, and where was he during all this?
You don't know? He never showed up.
Miss Scarlett, could I ask you a couple questions?
Of course.
Could you tell me about the relationship between the 2 professors? Did they have a rivalry of some sort?
No, of course not. You see, the truth is much juicier. Professor Plum was the illegitimate child of Mrs. White and Professor Econ.
Do you think that either Mrs. White or Professor Plum had anything to do with this?
Professor Plum wasn't here, so I doubt that very much, but Mrs. White might have been trying to get the inheritance that her son would have gotten.
Miss Peacock led me to believe that Mr. Green was on bad terms with the Professor Econ. Would you know why?
Probably money. They were both members of the FOMC, and I don't think I ever heard them talk about anything that wasn't the economy. But I find it amusing that Mrs. Peacock is talking about other people's relationships. I wouldn't be surprised if she is the murderer. She has recently been widowed for a 4th time. All of them experienced a strange or tragic accidents or mysterious disappearances. Everyone thinks she's the culprit, as each one has been richer than the last.
Why would Miss Peacock have motive to kill?
Well, don't you know? He was her 4th husband.
Oh, okay. Thank you for your cooperation.
Look at that.
Look! It looks like an economy in recession.
Now, were you alone the entire time?
Yes, I was attempting to practice. The senior professor and I like to gamble when we play billiard games.
And while you were down here, did you notice anything strange, any weird noises at all?
Everything is strange when the 6 of us get together.
Could you please elaborate?
Well, whenever we're together, somebody gets hurt.
Did you have any grudges against the professor?
We had our disagreements, but we were close business partners. I owned a large foreign company that had some debts to Professor Econ.
I think that'll be all. Thanks. This keeps getting more and more confusing. Mr. Green seems especially suspicious. What did you find?
Well, the women don't seem to have any motive, but they were the ones standing next to the body. Professor Plum actually turns out to be the son of the victim and the maid. And I also found out that Mr. Green had some disagreement with Professor Econ.
Something is definitely not right. Do we know the cause of death?
No, sir, but his wounds suggest that it was caused by a knife or a candlestick. It's only a matter of time before we find the murder weapon. What's going on here? Professor Econ is dead. I'm sorry for your loss.
No, you're lying.
Sorry, darling, that's true.
How?
Well, we don't know that yet, but do you mind, if you don't mind me asking, what were you doing up until now?
I was at my bank. I work at the New York Federal District Bank for the Federal Reserve. There was a discussion about the monetary policy, and they were talking about lowering the reserve ratio to increase aggregate demand, but I guess it's all pointless now that my father's gone.
Thank you. We need to find more about the suspects' relationships with each other. I think if we dig deep enough, we can find a clear motive. First, let's watch how they interact with each other.
Yes, sir.
How are you holding up? I know how hard this must be for you. I've lost family members too.
I don't know what I'm gonna do without him.
How about we try a seance? You could talk to him. I understand you performed many before.
I'd be delighted to help. Professor Economy, we implore you to speak beyond the grave. What last words do you wish your son to hear? Please, 2 fingertips. Now ask a question.
Father? Is that you?
You may ask a question, Professor.
What happened to you? Who did this to you?
Do you remember anything?
What do you remember?
You, go find out who's upstairs.
Yes, sir.
It won't come off.
I think you better come with me now.
Why are you looking at me? That was a little suspicious. What was he doing with a shredder? Guess I'm gonna be here for a while. Possibility curve, underemployment, massive debts, plan to go into bankruptcy. Per unit production cost, $40, productivity 2. What's this curve? Capital goods, consumer goods. What does this mean? Is there anything here that would help? Mr. Professor has notes? What is this? Wasn't he chairperson of the FMC? Oh, the FOMC. Okay. And they... What? No, it's not about bonds. Though if it was, that'd be easy. There's a recession curve that billards look like. Where is this? This looks so familiar. Okay, so there's something about Mr. Green's company and Mr. Plum's bank. Well, Professor Plum's bank. So this just says he's loaning beyond the excess reserves. The required reserves? What is that? Okay, so the required reserves are how much they have to keep. So he's selling the required reserves? Mr. Professor... Okay, so Professor Plum was selling the required reserves. And his father, Professor Economy, was planning to raise the reserve ratio even more. and was blackmailing his son. And Mr. Green's economy, underemployed according to the PPC, and was selling way more consumer goods than capital goods for years. So now that they can't sell anything, he's filing for bankruptcy. Shit. Oh well. So they both have a grudge against him. Huh. Think I understand now. Guess we have a motive. Might I ask where the other ladies have gone? No one knows? How very strange. Oh well, I feel you all know that the culprit is in this very room. I found this. Mr. Green, you have been close friends with Professor Plum for quite a while, haven't you? I'm sure you would hate to learn your best friend's mother was going to jail for trying to protect your son. This paper you failed to destroy proves that had Professor Economics lived, he would have made Mrs. White and her son lose all of their money. However, now that he is dead, they too are the sole inheritors of his estate. That, coupled with the blood found on Mrs. White's apron and the knife in her possession, makes her very suspect indeed. Mrs. White, you were closest to the body and were alone at the time of the murder. Do you have anything you'd like to say, or should I arrest you now?
No, I am guilty. But my son will receive the inheritance even if I have to rot in jail. No. Mother, please. Honey, I'm sorry. I did this because I love you. But now you have to let me go.
Why must I lose both my parents in one night?
My condolences to you both for such a trying ordeal. I cannot imagine the stress you must be under. Now this is truly tragic to you both. And to Miss Scarlett, I can only imagine how shocking it is to discover a woman who would be your mother-in-law would murder the father of her child in cold blood.
I was just surprised by her choice of weaponry. To think she would kill Professor Economics in the dining room with a candlestick, it seems kind of weird, right?
Miss, I wonder how you could have known it was a candlestick when I told everyone else it was a dagger.
Obviously, she doesn't know what she's talking about since you said he was killed with a knife.
Yes, well, interesting thing you should know about me. I lied. I knew the two of you had played it off too perfectly to catch without some sort of confession. You see, my associate is currently going to look for Mrs. Peacock, who, I'm sure, is trying to hide a candlestick for the two of you. And when she tries to make a deal, which she will, the two of you are going to suffer. So I suggest the two of you start talking and fast.
I didn't do any of it. It was all her.
You came up with the idea. I just got the others' help to hide the evidence and let you in without anyone noticing. You murdered your own father, and I let you into the conservatory, and this is how you treat me? I'm glad they found the candlestick because it has your fingerprints all over it.
It was all of us. Father wasn't going to give me or Mother any of the money when he died. Mrs. Peacock made a deal that if I killed him, she would split the money. Miss Scarlett and I were going to run away. Mr. Green was going to get away with foreign debt, and I would have become the chairman of the FOCM.
The two of you are under arrest. Anything you say can and will be held against you in the court of law.
Take her! Not like this!
Mr. Green, you're under the arrest for the obstruction of justice.
Walk. Ma'am, you're free to go.
Mom, no! I'm sorry, Mom. I did it for us.